Hey everybody, this is Kat from Magoosh, and today I'm going to be answering your questions about these shortened MCATs that are going to be given from May through September, and also any other questions you have about the admission process, how you might study. I am going to try and keep the conversation focused on those topics. If you have really specific questions, I'll try and get back with you later after the event. I'm really happy to have you here, and I actually have a piece of exciting news, which is that we are about to release a practice shortened free MCAT test. And so that could be available in a matter of hours, could be as late as maybe tomorrow, but it is just about to be released. And so in order to access that free practice test, you can sign up for the link that I'm going to post to my account, and we'll figure out a way to get it to you, okay? And I'll make an announcement again when we wrap up. Okay, so just a little bit of a recap, and also while I'm saying this, go ahead and feel free to start submitting questions, because I have someone helping me out typing up your questions separately, so don't worry that I won't be able to read them. The MCAT exams have been shortened to 5 hours, 45 minutes. They'll be offered 3 times a day, and that's beginning May 29th through September 28th. And there won't be any cancellation fees for the rest of 2020. The exams are going to be offered at 6:30, 12:15, and 6 p.m. So those are just a few of the changes. And I know that you have a lot of questions. Most of the questions I'm hearing from students have to do with admissions, how this is going to affect that, how do you choose a test date, and hopefully I'll get some ones that I haven't thought of also. Okay, and for those of you who are just joining us, I am going to be taking your questions. Go ahead and write them in as you have them. I'll try and get to as many as I can. And if you didn't hear the very first part of my announcement, we have just released, we're just about to release. We're about to release a free shortened practice test. So it's designed to approximate the exams that many of you will be taking this summer, from May to September. Okay. First question here. Would you recommend taking the old exam or the newer ones? What are the pros and cons? I think this is going to depend a lot on how much you've already practiced and how you tend to do with the really long format. So I think a lot of students see the shortened exam as an advantage in a lot of ways, especially if you're just now starting to study. The biggest disadvantage of the shortened exams are that you have you don't have a long break. You have 3 breaks of 10 minutes each, not much at all. For students who've already done a lot of practicing, a lot of pacing, I think that there could be advantages to sticking with the old format. However, I'm not sure that's the most important consideration. And so backing up a little bit, when you're trying to make the decision, I think the decision between should I take the longer exam or the shorter exam is probably less important than when should I try and take the exam, based on your admissions, based on when you're trying to apply. So I'm guessing that most students who are asking that are probably students who are applying to enter in 2022. And if you haven't done a lot of studying yet, I would say, yeah, try for the shorter one, see if you can get a spot for that. Next question. The best tips for trying to simulate a testing scenario while doing an exam prep at home. Thanks. Okay, so I'm not sure if this just means in general or specifically for the shortened exam, but I think, and also it depends on when you're going to be taking it, but I think that really most of your practice should be timed practice. So you want to focus on your pacing. And I really like the model of focusing on one exam section at a time. And so typically that's an hour and a half. And that's a really nice opportunity to practice all the skills of going through, looking at the passages. Many students choose to order passages out of order, or perhaps answer the discrete questions first and then go to passages. And so when you take an entire exam section, you get a lot of that practice. To take a full-length exam from start to end, that's a very important thing to do. You want to do it at least a few times before you take the actual exam. However, it's not realistic to do it a whole lot. And so that's why I like to tell students to really focus on doing exam sections and have a lot of your practice tests be like exam sections. Now, for those few times that you will be doing your full-length practice tests, set it up like an actual exam, and by that, really give yourself the same breaks that you'll be getting on exam day. And do remember that when you're in the testing center, you have to check in and check out. So every time you leave the room, you have to go through this whole little ordeal to get back in again. And so whatever break you think you have, you want to probably subtract about 2 or 3 minutes from that, just so you kind of have a sense of how much free time you really have, and so that you don't get flustered on exam day with all the checking in and checking out of the room. Otherwise, I mean, another thing you could do is do it with a friend or do it with someone you know, so that you kind of have that experience of taking it with somebody else in the room next to you on their own computer, and you can sort of get used to the background distraction that creates. Next question here. How should we decide when to test? I know applications are super time sensitive and I want to apply as early as possible. Okay, well, generally that is the best policy. Apply as early as possible, but as early as possible as you can do without jeopardizing your application or your MCAT studying. And so I posted a couple days ago that I think if you can, try and take the exam by mid to late June, because that will mean your scores will be released by July 7th. They are expediting score releases all the way through August 1st is the last day that they're expediting score releases. And so if you get your exam scores by July 7th, even though you'd be advised to submit the rest of your application materials before July 7th, the medical schools don't see your application materials until July 10th. So that's great. So really there's not an advantage really to taking it before that time, other than, I mean, there might be some advantages, but generally speaking, everyone's in the same boat who takes the exam up through that point in time. Aside from that though, I'm guessing these are people who are applying for 2021 admissions. I think, really, I had said earlier that you probably want to take the exam by early August, late July, early August would be best. But even in typical testing cycles, and here's kind of a little secret, you wouldn't guess it from reading it on Reddit, a whole lot of MCAT scores come in August and September. Very competitive applications. So a lot of what you kind of hear on the internet, read on the internet, is a little bit of people just stressing each other out with maybe assuming that things are even more time sensitive than they are. There is an advantage of getting things in early. Rolling admissions are real, it matters. Early decisions, all this stuff is very important. But the most important thing is to have a strong application. And so if you need to wait until the end of August, but you know that it's going to make a difference in how you can perform, then I think that would be the best decision. Okay, so on May 7th, we can reschedule our exam to any date and time we want, right? It doesn't need to be one of those 3 dates that they added. That is correct. And that's why it's going to be, I think, kind of a zoo on that day, because you're going to have a whole bunch of people. It's going to be, okay, everybody whose exams got canceled, they're going to be trying to find new dates. Everybody who was scheduled in July, thinking that they'd be taking the exam at 8 a.m., has now or will soon be given a new random testing time on that same date. But you might get 6:30 in the morning and you just aren't a morning person. And so all those people are going to be trying to change their exam times or dates. And then there are going to be people applying for 2022 admissions who are just trying to get the shorter exam. So yes, so the answer is everybody can sign up that date. You can switch your exams. There aren't any fees to reschedule, but there's going to be a lot of commotion. And it doesn't have to be one of the 3 dates they added. So they added the June 28th, September 27th, September 28th are the 3 ones they added. But really anything that's kind of between the May and the September is all being treated similarly, other than, like I said, exams after August 1st don't have the expedited score release. What happens if you already registered in June and your time still says 8 a.m.? So what the AAMC has been saying is that they're going to be just randomly assigning all of you folks in that situation, or July, exams August, they're going to be assigning you a time, but you can change it. So the nice thing is at least you have a secure spot. The bad thing is we don't know what time. And so far I haven't read anything about priority registration based on application year, based on whether your exams got canceled, based on whether you had an 8 a.m. spot. As far as I know, everyone's going to be trying for the same spots and there won't be priority. But we could hear more about that before May 7th. If we currently have a July test date, should we try to reschedule to an earlier time in June to better fit the application cycle timeline? Let me think this through a little bit. Is there an advantage to doing the June, to signing up for June if you have a July? Well, if you're ready to take the exam, I mean, I would say so. The only thing I would caution against and just ask you to think a little bit about is what do the shelter-in-place orders look like in your home state? So some of these exams are opening up in May. Well, in California, we're being told that we're sheltering through May. So there might be some advantages depending. There's less of a chance that your exam will be canceled if you take it a little bit later in the summer. So that's the only advantage. Otherwise, speaking purely from a med school cycle point of view, it makes more sense to take it early if you're prepared, if you've been studying. Do you think the level of difficulty for each section will be the same as the normal 7.5-hour MCAT? Yes, I do. I don't see any reason to believe it will be all that different. So if you think about it, so each of the science sections is going to have 11 fewer questions. The cars is going to have, let's see, what is it, 5 fewer questions. And so, first of all, it's not that many, the overall number isn't that much less, and also some of those questions are being taken from what they call their field test questions. So on a regular MCAT, you have what they call they're questions that are just kind of thrown in there. They're not scored, they're just testing out new questions. And they never make it known which of these are test questions and how many there are. They're all kind of speculations and ranges about how many of those there are on an exam. Probably there's somewhere between 10 and 15 is sort of our best guess. And so about 1/3 of the questions that are getting cut are going to be those test questions. So really, I don't think it's going to be all that different. And the amount of time you have per question is very, very similar. It's exactly the same for cars. It's just a tiny bit less for the science sections. And we don't yet know, this is what is irritating me, is that we don't know how many of the questions are going to be discrete questions and how many passages we're going to see, because obviously that does change your pacing. Passage-based questions take longer to answer than discrete questions. So hopefully they won't be cutting all of the discrete questions, or most of them. That wouldn't be in your favor. I don't think they will be. I think they'll only be cutting a couple discrete questions And that's how we're setting up our practice exam at Magoosh. So we thought this through, I've put it together, and I'm going to be setting it up with 13 discrete questions per exam section. And then every section has 8 passages, whereas typically you have the 10 passages for science sections and 9 for cars. All of them will have 8. Now, I don't know this is how they're going to do it, but this is my best guess. Okay, if we take the exam this year, but are not applying until next year, will this affect how the schools view our applications next year? I don't know. I don't think so. I could try and think about all the ways that it potentially could, but I can't think of any reason that would influence how your application is perceived. Like I said, I mean, I don't think it's going to be more difficult or less difficult. I mean, it would show that you were proactive, I guess there's that. But the more important thing is that you have good scores. And so instead of thinking of it through that lens, really think about when will you be best prepared to take it. And of course, you can never be perfectly prepared to take the MCAT. But just, try and let that be the most important aspect. When will you be prepared to take it? How long is the lunch break? Can you cover the timing of the tests and breaks, please? Yes, I can. So there isn't a lunch break. Yeah, you have 3 10-minute breaks. And so your longer break has been cut. And so the way it's going to work out is the whole seated time, as they call it, not counting registration, is 5 hours, 45 minutes. So you come in and you have a 76-minute, so the order's the same, right? So it always starts with the chemistry, physics. You have 76 minutes, answer 48 questions. That's chemistry, physics, 10-minute break. Then you have cars. Now cars is 81 minutes, so it's just a little bit longer, which isn't how their typical exam is. So 81 minutes instead of 76, and you also still have the 48 questions. Then 10-minute break, and then the other 2 science sections are just like the chemistry. So 76 minutes to answer 48 questions. Can you please give an overview of the shortened versus long exam, like what changed and what it means? So the only things that we really know is that you're going to have I've sort of said this before in different ways, but 11 fewer questions for the science sections and 5 fewer questions for the car sections. So it's 48 questions for all 4 sections. All right, so it's, 38 fewer questions total on the exam. And you have, let's see, I don't remember exactly how many minutes less it is than typical. But you're looking at about 1 hour less testing time. It's being condensed even more than that because the breaks are shorter. And the reason they're doing that is so that they can offer 3 exams per day to try and get as many people into exam slots as possible. So those are the main things that have changed. So there's the 3 exam times, questions have been cut. Again, we don't know how many of the questions are going to be discrete questions that are being cut versus passage-based questions. But there won't be any of the field test questions on the shortened exam. And so but you don't know which ones those are anyway. And so in some ways that's kind of an advantage, because I think a lot of students kind of get a little bit hung up on wondering, like psyching themselves out. Is this a test question? Is this a real question? Is this really weird because this is a test question, or do I just not know this stuff? So I think it's kind of nice not to have the test questions, frankly. It'll probably feel a little bit more straightforward than a typical exam would because of that, because test questions sometimes have a little bit of a weird feel to them. If we have a mediocre MCAT score and we're planning on retaking in June, should we submit our first score in the application or leave it blank? Will that hurt our application? Okay. So this goes down to, there are different kind of like strategy games that students play with this. I mean, so what a lot of students do is when they don't totally know what score they're going to get, or they don't, their initial score isn't great, what they do is they will sometimes submit to a school that is sort of like it's kind of like a fake school that they're submitting to. So it's usually something that's way out of range, like it's way above their ability level or their likelihood of getting in, or it's something that's really not anything they're interested in attending. And what that does is it gets the whole exam process rolling, and so everything gets submitted to that one school. And then once your MCAT scores do come out, then you are set up to be able to quickly submit to your secondary schools, or the schools that you actually want to send your applications to. So that's one technique. I'm not sure if that's exactly what you're asking, but basically, if you've taken the MCAT, those exams do get submitted. There isn't a way of withholding an MCAT score. So that's a little bit different from like SAT, ACT, SAT, they often don't look at scores unless you select which ones you want them to look at. But if you have a score that's not great, it will be seen by the med schools. And I think what you're asking is, how do I make sure that med schools see my new exam score at the same time that they see my mediocre score? And so one way of doing that is to not apply to the schools you're interested in until you get your scores out. But the way to make it go really quickly is to have everything all set up through your kind of like decoy school, so that as soon as your exams come out, then you can just quickly submit to your secondary. Do you have an estimated date when the new practice exam will be available? And will this be questions from the previous Magoosh question bank or new questions? So in case you didn't hear at the beginning, I've put together a new practice exam. It is from our existing pool of questions. We didn't have time to write all new questions. So if you're already using that, they will look familiar probably. We have 3 exams of practice questions. And so if you've taken a few of our practice questions, you've already seen our bank of questions. It will be ready really soon. We were hoping it would actually be ready by now, but then there were a couple questions about links and URLs, and so hopefully today. It might be tomorrow, and so I can't say for sure. But what you can do is make sure to sign up for the link. So there's a link that either is or soon will be posted in my bio on Instagram. Sign up for it and we'll get you that free practice test. It is taken online, and so you just kind of have a free account that gives you access specifically to that pool of questions. And that way you can practice your timing. And at some point we might try and figure out how to get all of our question pool flipped over to the new shortened length. But right now we'll be releasing that one practice test worth of questions in that format. Let's see. Oh, and I just got a note. So all of our practice tests are going to be adjusted within Magoosh if you are a paying student. And so we will be able to offer the updated format for all of our pools of questions, which is nice. So you'll be able to take three practice tests, probably 3 and a little bit, because we currently have enough questions for 3 full length. Let's see, besides the shortened exam you will be releasing, should we take the 7.5-hour full-length test, but adjust them to the modified times? And if we do that, how should we gauge our scores? First of all, I do want to add that if you take our, and this is not directly in relation to this, but it just reminded me, if you take our shortened exam that we've just released, you don't actually get a score estimate on that. So unfortunately, we don't have that. So I just wanted to put that out there. But I think it still is like a really great study and testing tool. Okay, so this student was asking, should we take the 7.5-hour test and adjust them to the modified times? And how do we gauge our scores? So that's a really good question. I mean, you could just do a proportion. You could do kind of a, set up your ratios and figure out what percentage of questions you answered correctly and set that up as a fraction and translate it to what percentage you would need, say, to get, 125 in each section. I think that is a good idea, and I think it is what a lot of students will be doing, is just using existing practice exams and setting them up themselves to be shorter. And so hopefully we'll find out soon exactly like what these shorter exams are going to look like. And like I said, my best guess is that there will be 8 passages per section and 12 to 13 discrete questions per section, for the 3 science sections, of course. In terms of gauging score, I think that's the best advice I have, is to just try and set it up as a ratio based on how it would be if it was a full-length exam. Next question. What is the recommended timeline to start with secondaries? Well, you want to be working on them like quickly. I'm not sure I understand exactly what the question means, like in terms of when you should be releasing them, but it's as soon as you submit your like initial applications and are done, and then you do the MCAT, right? I'm thinking about people who are in this like real crunch admissions timeline. That's when you want to start. As soon as you're done with those MCATs, say June, that's when you want to start really putting, like, just making sure your secondaries are in really good shape. So a lot of students will be working on those in late June, early July. Definitely make sure you get your transcripts ordered and sent. That actually, statistically, is the biggest holdup for med school admissions, are getting your official transcripts. And sometimes it's because the institution drops the ball. Sometimes it's because students don't realize they need an official, and they get an unofficial or a copy or things like that. So make sure that you have all of those materials. Next question. I took an accredited LPN program while in high school and currently have a license. Do I need to request that transcript? While in high school, I have a license. My doorbell just rang. It might ring again. Please ignore it. So I am not entirely sure. I think that probably you will need a transcript if you want to report it on your applications, but I don't know for sure. So we'll get back with you with more details on that. Next question, does your MCAT score still report even if it's outside the 3-year range? That's a question I actually don't know the answer to. I'm not sure if it shows up at all. So 3 years ago would be 2017. I don't know. I think so. I think it does, but I'm not sure. We can get back with you on that one as well. That's something good for me to know. Next question, will all MCAT tests from now on have the quicker results turnaround? And the answer to that is no. The very last test that's going to have this quick turnaround is August 1st. And so all the other exams, even this August and September, are going to go back to the 4-week score release timeline. And to me, I think that's actually kind of interesting, because I see that as the AAMC's way of gauging whether they think students are going to be students applying for 2021 or 2022. And that's how I'm thinking of it anyway. And so they're kind of seeing, anybody who takes the exam through August 1st is probably somebody who's going to be enrolling in 2021 on average. And people after that, we're looking at a later, we're looking at people in the following year. So I found that interesting, just because we're always giving advice on, like, when's the last time to take the MCAT and so on and so forth. And this is kind of like this subtle way of the AAMC sort of saying who they think is taking the exam at these various times. So as soon as they stop expediting the scores, that's sort of a signal that they think they're looking at the next year of people. But there will still be plenty of people in August taking the MCAT for admissions into 2021. Do testing dates typically fill up quickly? Should I worry about not being able to have a spot to take the test when I plan to? Testing dates do typically fill up very quickly, and this is even in regular admissions cycles when admissions opens. However, there's another thing that happens typically, and that's that there is a lot of shuffling. And so it's very common for somebody to initially go in and not get the spot they want or the testing center they want on the date they want, and then get on the waiting list and they are able to get in. So yes, they fill up quickly because people are, jump all over it and really want to secure spots, but people are also juggling their own and trying to get into their preferred spots. Maybe they're on waiting lists, and so there's a lot of shuffling. Should you be worried about not having a spot? I think here it really depends on where you live, how many testing centers are in your vicinity. I think that there will be enough spots overall for students. The bigger concern will be, will there be any near where you live? In terms of should you worry about it, I mean, I don't think worrying is going to help, but I think maybe what you could do if you live someplace that's a little bit more remote, doesn't have as many test centers, is you could notify med schools right now. And students have actually been having pretty good luck, from what I've been following, of getting responses from med schools. There have been a lot of questions. Students have asked things like, what happens if I take the MCAT in August? Is that too late? And how much are you going to, are you going to be delaying your application cycle? All sorts of stuff. And a lot of the med schools have been really great about getting back with students. So I would, just as a way to put yourself at ease, get more information, and also just start the communication process. I would reach out to med schools right now, and if you think that's going to be a concern. Now, May 7th, you'll know more. May 7th isn't that far away, so you could wait until May 7th and then reach out. But it doesn't hurt to do it now. How will international students be affected? I am not really sure, because I don't know enough about how the testing centers are coordinated in other countries. And a lot of this has to do with testing centers, not just with the AAMC, not just with the med school application timeline, and not just with coronavirus. International students, I also am not sure if you mean just in terms of your citizenship or if you are currently residing in a different country. If you're talking about Canada, I don't think things will be that different, but if you're talking about someplace in another hemisphere, there might be more changes. Unfortunately, I can't say much more than that based on the information here because I don't have specifics, but you can email me directly and I'll try and answer whatever question you have based on your situation. Next question is, how do we begin filling out applications for medical school, and which system is that through? So most students, it depends on if you're applying to the allopathic or osteopathic schools, and then Texas has its own application system. And so students who are applying for allopathic med schools, the system is called AMCAS, AMCAS. And I would say, get started right now because it's quite a long process. There are some initial pre-registration fields you fill out initially. You can choose which schools. It can just be one school. Again, it can just be a school you even kind of like put out there as a way to secure a position in the application process. Or you can apply to several if you feel like you're ready to kind of commit to a series of schools. in those first steps, but most students usually don't do that and wait until they submit to everybody. So, I mean, it consists of multiple components. You have personal statements, you need letters of recommendation, there are interviews. This is kind of like one of the last steps of the whole process for applying. But the nice thing about the whole setup is that the process, you don't have to apply to each school separately usually. There sometimes are exceptions where medical schools want something very specific for their school, and they'll let you know if that's the case. But you apply through the system, and then the system sends your information to different medical schools. And it takes quite a while. I believe, is it open? I know it's accessible now, it's open, but the first stages of registration are open right now for people who want to enter in 2021. And like I said earlier, the information will be sent to medical schools beginning July 10th. Now that's not a deadline, that's when things are first sent to med schools. Next question here. Strategies for a physician assistant who wants to go back to med school and only needs to complete the MCAT, but it's been years since taking MCAT topic classes. Okay, so a lot of people are in situations like this. And in terms of, it's been years since taking MCAT topic classes, and as a physician assistant, most likely you haven't taken the MCAT. Some do, but it's not required. So I would start by taking, well, there are different ways you can go through this. I don't know if you've ever taken practice tests, but I would start with a practice test, not with one of the official practice tests. You want to save the full lengths for when you're really like in the throes of studying. But you want to get a sense of the exam first and just kind of get used to the questions, get used to the pacing. And then from there, what I recommend students do, once you do that, definitely make sure you sign up for an AAMC account, and that way you can see what it actually even looks like on the computer, what the features are like. And you do want to use their practice tests, so pay for their practice tests, even though I don't recommend that you take them right off the bat. Their pools of practice questions are really good, so you want to make sure you have access to all that. But a nice kind of study step before you dive full force into the AAMC materials, I think, is to do kind of a general overview, big picture review. And so the way I did this myself was I used, this was before I worked for Magoosh, I used exam crackers. And I like exam crackers because their books are thin, and it's just a really nice way of getting through a lot of content quickly. And so you just kind of get they're set up kind of almost like chapter summaries. Each book is thin, there are a lot of pictures, it's just kind of highlights, broad strokes. You're not learning in depth, but you're getting a great sense of the overall coverage of a topic. Once you have a sense of the coverage of a topic, then it's time to actually start kind of like you're studying. And this is when you'll want to decide, are you going to use like an online course like Magoosh? Do you learn well through videos? Think about how you do with videos like Khan Academy. That's sort of insight to, do you learn better that way? Or are you somebody who really learns better just, using test prep books? And then you might want to do different reviews of test prep books that are a little bit more in detail. So some of the other test prep companies, other than exam crackers, some of them have like really, really in-depth coverage. Like the Berkeley Review is notorious for having very detailed study materials. And at that point, so after you've done your overview and you're sort of at that stage where you're doing like what I'm calling the real studying, make sure that you're also doing plenty of practice questions. One of the biggest mistakes MCAT students make is they don't start practice questions early enough. They're either trying to save them, is a lot of times what they tell us, or I think that they're afraid of taking them because it's intimidating and it's hard to take an exam and miss 50% of them when you're used to being an A student. but you don't want to put that off. So you can save the official AAMC practice tests for the end, but I think that you don't want to save practice tests, practice questions, or practice tests across the board. You want to be taking those simultaneously as you're studying. And one of the big advantages of that is that it keeps you studying the right things. So instead of focusing on trying to memorize a whole bunch of stuff that really, it turns out you don't really need to know anyway, or you barely need to know much of it, and you've just spent 60% of your content review memorizing stuff that isn't all that important, you can use your practice questions to inform the type of studying that you do. So those are my best pieces of advice. The other thing I would say for somebody who's been out of school for a while is that you might look into taking online course or signing up for a college at a local school if you feel like maybe you'd like to take physics again. I mean, I know that I learn really well in a class setting, so I think if there was a particular subject that I was struggling with, and I had the time, I probably would retake a question maybe in an online format or community college or something. So that's my advice. Good luck to you. Next question. Do you know if we are able to sign up to take the MCAT with the coronavirus going on? Well, so the May 7th is when they're going to open up registration for all of these June, July, August, or May even, May, June, July, August, September exams. Now, I think the question, of course, is, are some of those going to be canceled? And I think that's kind of what you're asking. I mean, especially these late May exam dates. What I've been noticing in terms of how the AAMC has been handling all of this and what I know of the organization is I don't think they will. Now, I apologize in advance if they do cancel these late May exams. Just based on the way they're handling it, though, I think they're going to leave it up to the testing centers and the states to decide whether things are canceled. So that doesn't mean that these exam dates are necessarily going to go through. What it means is I don't think they're going to be canceled nationally canceled. But late May, like I said earlier, in California, we still have orders to basically not go anywhere through May. And so, I think you need to make the decision based on what's going on in your own local vicinity when you're thinking about which exams to sign up for. And again, like I said, it is possible that they will cancel these late May exam dates, but I don't think they will. I think the cancellations are going to be regional and determined more by the test centers in the states at this point moving forward than by the medical society. What is the best way to take notes while watching Magoosh videos? My problem is that I passively cover the material. Okay, well, so you're already doing the first right thing, which is recognizing this, and you're not the only one. The best way, it depends on the topic, honestly. Like, as we all know, the MCAT covers such a range of topics, and they require different study techniques, and they require different types of comprehension. So I think that if you're, the way I think of it is when you're looking at, so sociology would be the very most auditory-based learning of all of this, right? Like, it's kind of like just a regular college course. Sociology content, you just hear it, you take notes, you listen to it. So that would just be regular note-taking. That's probably not where you're having the problem so much. With a lot of the psychology, especially the psychology that verges on biology and the biology, you're looking at highly visual types of learning. And so for when you're watching videos there, I would say the way I would do it would be to have, as you're watching the video, have your notepad opened for taking notes the way you typically would. I wouldn't recommend the typed in note feature. I wouldn't use it anyway for biology because biology is so visual. And so I'd want something where I could actually draw things. And I would also probably have next to me anything else that is covering that same topic through a different modality. So, earlier I had mentioned like exam crackers or, maybe a study guide. Study resources are always nice. We're in the process right now of adding more of those. So kind of like downloadable guides that you can use and manipulate and print out and draw on. And so I think having that next to you while you watch the video so that you can kind of like translate, because as we all know, sometimes you look at a cross-section of a cell membrane and it looks so different from one angle than it does from another angle. And there's something that really helps learning when you can be simultaneously looking at a lesson on the screen and also an image right next to you and sort of figuring out, oh yeah, this is what I'm looking at. This is, this protein here is also this integral protein right here. And then so for the physics and chemistry, now you're looking at practice questions. So for those, I would just recommend watching the lesson. When practice questions come up that the teacher walks you through, pause the video, try and do it yourself, and then watch as they explain their process of going through the answer questions. And then before you go immediately on to the next video, try to do some practice questions yourself, either through books you have, or we have a few like quiz questions, not very many. I'd like to get more at Magoosh, but those are nice because they're quicker to answer. Or just online searches, honestly. It's like physics and chemistry, those are such widely taken courses that there's a lot of quiz material out there. There are a lot of worksheets out there that teachers post. So that's my best advice for taking notes. And then also just keeping your notes all kind of in the same place. So organizing them so it's easy for you to find your notes again when you need to go back and condense and study. The next question is, what's the best way to learn MCAT material? Do I have any study tips, recommendations, how to keep organized throughout the process? Okay, well, a lot of that is kind of piggybacks off of what I just was discussing. So best way to learn MCAT material, I think, is, again, you want to get used to the test, just like what's on the test. Do an overview of the content you'll be looking at. Not trying to learn a bunch of stuff, but just trying to get your bearings of all the different topics that are covered on the MCAT. Then you want to simultaneously do your studying. And so these are the areas where you're not as strong, where you still need to learn something. Maybe it's been a while since you took that course. Maybe you weren't that strong in it to begin with and you kind of like scraped by somehow. But you want to do that simultaneously with answering practice questions. And then towards the end of your studying, so like the last month, 6 weeks of your studying, that's when you really want to be focusing on your pacing, your practice questions, and also memorization. So that's when you really, flashcards, condensing notes, making sure that you can easily identify molecules, and that's my best advice. Don't memorize things too early. Do practice questions early. Don't get too worried about the pacing too early. I think that it's so much more important to understand early on. But then again, you have to balance that with not diving too far into the weeds. And that's something that I struggle with, because if I don't know something, I want to figure it out. I want to figure it out thoroughly. And unfortunately with the MCAT, that's a great quality for somebody to have who's going into med school, and it's great to be curious. But with the MCAT, really, it's really more of a problem-solving test. And part of the art of the MCAT is figuring out just how much detail do I really need to know. And a lot of times, you don't need to know as much as you would need to know if you were taking maybe an upper division course where you really need to understand it. remember that the MCAT really only covers, for the most part, introductory courses. Most of you have had 3, 4, 5, who knows how many biology courses, many of those upper division. The MCAT only covers 2 semesters of biology, and then of course there's biochemistry. But the topics covered are not advanced topics. What makes the MCAT hard is that the questions are not they're not straightforward. It's not always easy to tell what type of a question you're looking at, what type of approach you should use to figure out the answer. And a lot of times you are being asked to make leaps in judgment, leaps in analysis, and you're doing it with a time crunch. So the MCAT is a challenging test. So you need to know a lot of material, but you don't want to be spending too much time trying to learn it from the inside out. I mean, it doesn't hurt, of course. It's going to make it easier if you happen to know it in that depth, but your study time is better spent on making sure that you know the breadth, the basics, and that you have taken plenty of practice questions. And then the other thing I really recommend is that when you're taking practice questions and practice tests, definitely make sure to read the answer explanations. And that counts also, in some ways, I almost want to emphasize more for questions that you get right, because a lot of times what happens is students get a question right for the wrong reasons, or they get a question right, but there's something about the way the answer is explained in the explanation that clears up something completely different that's related to one of the trap answer choices. And so you wind up learning a lot by reading the answer explanations. Let's see, I'm getting a little 10-minute warning here. Okay. And then how to keep organized through the process. I mean, part of it, honestly, you won't know until you start. That's one of the most frustrating things. It's true of any big project. It's true of any kind of educational endeavor, is that you start with one technique and you end using another. So start with the organizational technique that you think will work the best for you. Are those just notebooks with tabs and dividers? Are you somebody who likes to store things more on your computer? Do you like to print things out? Do you like flashcards? But I would say try to keep everything relatively in one place, and make sure if you're somebody who puts things in stacks that you know it's in a stack. And keep some kind of a calendar system. What I would do is, maybe just to start out, any day you study, keep track of what you studied. How many hours did you study which subjects, and how many questions did you answer? And so you'll be able to see over time kind of your patterns, and you'll be able to see maybe where the holes are. Which subjects are you not circling back to frequently enough? Where are you getting lost? Where do you need to balance a little bit? Okay. Okay, so this question says, some students are having step 1 test dates as late as the end of May, already canceled. Do I think this trend will continue with MCAT test dates? I think that May test dates could be canceled, but like I said before, and this is just my guess, I could be completely wrong about this, but I believe that the test cancellations that could happen in May are more likely to happen at the level of the testing center than at the whole level of the AAMC. Now, granted, the AAMC did come out at the national level and cancel test dates already, the ones that many of you had test dates that were canceled for April. So it could happen again, but I think my guess is that, because everybody's best guess is that by the end of May, a lot of states will no longer be requiring the same degree of social distancing, that probably a lot of things will be open by the end of May. Not everywhere. Here in California, we'll still be working from home, and we will still be, I think pretty much everything will still be closed down here. But anyway, so I do think that we'll see more cancellations, but I don't think we'll see as many, if any, at the level of the whole national level. But I don't know. This is just my prediction. Okay, what is a good science GPA to have to apply to med school? If you don't have a great science GPA, could you rely on getting a high MCAT score, or should you retake a few classes? So your science GPA and how it's perceived is going to depend quite a bit on which school you attend. What that means is that the more rigorous or competitive your undergraduate institution, the better, let's say, 3.5 looks than from a school that isn't known for having as rigorous, I guess, grading or admission criteria. Now, I don't actually know that component of it from the back end. I've never observed that part, so I'm not sure. For instance, I do happen to know that a lot of the most prestigious schools actually have more grade inflation at the undergraduate level. So I'm not sure how the med school panels put that into their equation. What I do know is that your science GPA is going to be seen differently based on the institution that you're graduating from. And the best way to find out more about that would be to ask the schools you're applying to. You know, what can you tell me about a GPA from such and such institution? Now, typically, like somewhere between like a 3.5 to 3.7 science GPA is solid. It's 3.5 might be a little bit on below average for med school, which I know is very high still. I mean, it's a very high GPA by any other measures. But it just depends on the classes you're taking as well. So like a 3.7, you're in good shape. 3.5 is kind of like getting more into the it depends sort of range. But people you get accepted with GPAs below that, you know, all the time. So a strong MCAT is one way to offset a GPA that's not as strong. Now, as for the question, should you retake classes? You know, I wouldn't recommend retaking classes if the classes were originally taken at your primary undergraduate institution. So the only time that I would recommend retaking classes that you've already taken would be, for instance, maybe you took classes over summer school that were where your grades weren't that high, and you know you could potentially, depending on the instructions, and you want to read these carefully, you could either not submit your summer school transcripts if that is legit. A lot of times I think it says all institutions you've ever attended, so you probably still do, but it won't be seen in the same light if, for instance, let's say you took organic chemistry at a community college, got a C+, and then retook it at your regular institution and got an A-. So I would say only in those situations do you want to retake science courses. What you could do, though, is you could take classes that are similar but harder than the classes that you didn't do as well in. And so if you could just take a more advanced version of whatever you struggled with. So you know, if you struggled with cell biology, you know, maybe take something that is you know, there are many different upper division classes that kind of fall within the school of cell biology. So you might decide to do that, and that would definitely both, if you got a good grade, of course, it would raise your score, and it would also it would compensate in the view of the admissions panel because it's a similar type course, but it's more challenging. So we are almost out of time, so I'm going to wrap up now. Thanks so much for joining us. I hope this was helpful. Let us know what else we can help out with, answer questions about. And a reminder, once again, we are going to be releasing a practice exam of the shortened length based on my best guess about how it's going to be set up by the AAMC this summer. and you can access that for free. And all you need to do is go to my link in my bio, sign up there, and we'll find a way of getting this to you. And it could be today, it could be tomorrow, it will be soon. So the exam's already formatted. We're just trying to get some technical aspects taken care of. That is it for today. Take advantage of our free exam, and I hope to see you on other events soon. Thanks so much for joining, and take care. Good luck studying.